So this is about the easiest way to haul this thing around with the mini excavator. All the tires are flat and splitting, sidewalls are split out on them. So I got all new tires for this thing, and I'm gonna actually start measuring the bolt pattern, get some wheel spacers so we can widen the stance of this thing a little bit. Put new tires on here and start stripping everything we don't need off of it, because we're gonna actually be building a forward controls for this thing. So you're gonna actually be sitting kind of where the rack is, getting rid of the handlebars, doing a big flatbed on here. It's gonna be a cool project. So we're gonna take this down the yard and start stripping everything back. Well, all right, I got a lot of ATV tires here. I got 6 for that Polaris 6x6 project. I got 2 Bear Claws here. I got 2 more on the way for my TRX 300 Honda, finally putting tires on that. And I got to order 2 more for the front of my quad truck. Total of 12 tire changes. I decided to buy a little cheap Harbor Freight, little $40 tire changer. I took my quad truck, the rear rims in a while back to Walmart. They charged 15, 20 bucks a tire to mount. But they did such a bad job, they dented up the rims so bad, I'm like, I'm not paying those guys to damage the rims, so much rather do it at the shop. I need a stand for my tire changer, and I'm not gonna build one, it's not really worth it to me, so it's kind of ridiculous, but I'm gonna weld to my wood stove. I got a 500-pound anchor, and I don't care cosmetically if the wood stove has a few tack welds on it, so I'm gonna tack that onto here, and we're gonna change out some tires. Hey, it's gonna work, fine. So, I got tired of digging around my town trying to find valve stems. Nobody actually had the nice stubbies. Everyone had like 2-inch long ones, which you just get ripped off of these things if you're off-roading. So I bought a 25 pack online, a nice little installation tool, and I got a gallon of tire lube. I know you can use soapy water. I've used that for years, but I'm tired of getting inside my rims later on and finding that there's a bunch of corrosion inside the rim. So I just bought this stuff. Should last a lifetime for me. Putting in a valve stem here. You can use pliers too, you just gotta be pretty gentle on the valve stem. A little more difficult to mount than remove them. The way I felt about it, instead of putting a bunch of money out and having somebody install all my wheels, it's really not that bad once you start learning a few techniques. I don't want to change it with this side up because the rim is much wider, the flat part. I want to have this side up. I want to put the tire over that so I can get the center of the groove down low right in here. You're not fighting this wide section of the rim. So I'm gonna mount the next tire on here. Alright, as you guys saw, got that tire mounted. I think this is the 3rd one I did. Every time I do it, it just gets a little easier and easier. This thing is well worth the 40 bucks. And I know it's ridiculous tack welding it to my wood stove stand, but it holds it really well. Pinned, if I grind off the rest of the paint, I can unpin it here, take it off, the rest of it, and you could just live on the wood stove. I don't really care. I'm gonna save you guys a bunch of boring footage because you don't need to see me do this time after time again. You get the point. I'm gonna paint the rims, and we got some wheel spacers that just came in for the 6x6 to widen it a little bit. It's gonna take a little while cleaning up these front wheels because they're just coated with old, I think, gear oil in them. The front seals on the hubs were blowing out, so we got new seals and bearings for that as well. I don't know if I mentioned yet, guys, I really enjoy having the mini excavator. The thing works so good. It's so useful for around here. All right, got 4 of the 6 tires on here. This is the new tread. Just mainly to get this thing pushed in here. The disc brakes are kind of stiff, so I struggled so much to get it pushed in. It's got 4 to 6 chains on here and a drive belt. Some of these parts in the drive system on here, since I've ever had this machine back when it ran, have been mysterious to me. I kind of understand the layout, but not really. Everything's shrouded in plastic and metal. This thing's gonna get completely butchered and modified. It's gonna get repowered with the 420cc, I think it's 16 horse Duramax engine. Air-cooled, 4-stroke, super reliable, simple. This 2-stroke's been hideously loud, smoky, just gnarly. It's just not a rad engine on here. I might keep it around, rebuild it for another project, but I'm done with this engine. Even when it worked, it didn't work that good. Handlebars, seating area is getting completely stripped down. As you guys know earlier, this thing is going to get turned into a little mini replica Pinzgauer military truck. It's going to be forward control, so basically I'm going to be building the bench up here where you sit at the rack. It's going to be pretty fun. I want something that I can have a bench seat up there. Me and my son can go ride around on back roads and just have a good time. Still have a utility machine, but it's going to be more of like a little mini replica play kind of a vehicle. What I really need to do is strip all the non-essentials off. Like, you're not riding back here anymore. The handlebars, the bed, the plastic work, the engine, all that's coming out. So the next little bit, I'm going to be stripping this thing down. Let's get pulling this thing apart so we can start building into a whole new creation here. In all the years of having this thing, I can't really recall if I've ever had this cover off. Maybe check the condition of the belt once. I don't know. It's been a long time. Like I said, it did run. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago. Basically, when I built the little mini quad truck, it replaced this because this became so hard to start. Breaking pull starter cords all the time. It would backfire so bad it actually break the springs that hold the expansion chamber to the cylinder. And it was smoky and noisy and just a pain. It was really hard to get running. Once you got running, it's hard to keep running. So just replace it with a simple little 4-stroke, something that'll be more reliable. Well, as much as I didn't want to really cut the top rack off of this thing, it's kind of one of those things I had to do. Someone welded a chainsaw mount between this rack and the top. This front grill and the rack on top were independent originally, but this got stick welded onto here. And the oil tank on top of the fender here was riveted on factory, and the front fenders were riveted onto the frame up here. Who does that? I guess Polaris does. All right. So I tried to go through and remove most of this hardware between the floorboards to the fenders. They're completely rusted all on. I'm gonna go through and cut these little mud flaps off. I want to thank the guys at Harbor Freight for sending me out this Hercules angle grinder. It's cordless. Been using it around my place from cutting metal roofing and flashing for addition on my shop to all kinds of different metal work, and it's been rock solid so far. You guys are gonna see this a lot in the videos. It's really nice to have a cordless angle grinder again. So I'm not a big fan of Polaris. Now, granted, this thing is like 30 years old, and I'm sure they've come a long ways, but my experience with this machine, I was used to growing up working on Japanese bikes mainly. The stuff you see on this is nothing you would see on Japanese vehicles. Just kind of crude. It seems like a cross between a go-kart and somebody that built something in their garage. You got torque screws, Phillips on here, metric and standard. The wiring harness is probably the crudest thing I've ever seen on a machine from the 90s. I'll bring you guys over here and show you. So I was chasing around some electrical issues with this thing years ago, and I pulled off the side cover and saw the spaghetti of wiring here. Basically spade connectors that go onto like a breadboard. There's no rubber sealed connections anywhere, and you just plug these things in at random spots. Like, terrible. Really, really, really bad, especially for something from the early 90s. That's going to be ridden around out in the rain. Let me get a close-up so you guys see what I'm saying. I mean, they're just super crude. You have to make a full electrical map if you pulled any of this stuff off of here. Hauled it out of my shop here. I'm going to fire up the pressure washer, clean this thing up because it's got like 30 years worth of grime and grit on it. I would have liked to have the motor pulled by now, but I can't do that because I need a primary clutch puller. I'm waiting on one of those I ordered. So we're going to pressure wash this thing, get it ready for tearing apart the front end. I have a bunch of components to put up here. So let's clean it up. And I don't think we'll have time in this video to start making some adapters and see if it's very possible to mount this clutch onto the 420cc engine. But in the next video, I'm sure we'll get to that. So let's pop this off of here now. Alright. So one of my concerns was it wasn't going to have a keyway, it wasn't going to be a straight bore. It was going to be tapered, and sure enough, it's tapered. I know there's going to be some people griping that I'm going to get rid of a 2-stroke engine, because people have these fantasies and wonderful dreams about 2 strokes, and granted 2 strokes are magically powerful. They're pretty awesome engines when they work right, but they got a lifespan on a lot of them, and I didn't think that this engine isn't worth rebuilding to me. I just want to go 4-stroke, something more reliable. I just don't think I could ever trust this engine. So I'm going to put it in a 4-stroke in here and have it a little more quiet, a little more reliable. It's just a route I want to go. I'm sure some people are going to gripe. I hear it all the time in my other video. I swapped out a blown up, seized up CR80 mini bike or dirt bike, you know, locked up from a previous owner. Crank was just full of rust. I pulled the engine out and put an XR120 big bore all tricked out in it. And I probably get 1 or 2 comments a month how stupid that was for me to put a 4-stroke when I had an awesome high power CR80. Even though I mentioned the video a bunch of times, the engine was locked up from a previous owner. So I just put this 420cc Duramax engine on the running board of the quad here. It's going to take some serious modification to fit in the frame, but I'm kind of blown away the size difference. This engine is enormous. It's going to be a challenge to fit in that frame. That 250 was pretty compact, especially being a 2-stroke. Of course, the gas tank, exhaust, and air filter are going to come off and be rerouted to different locations. But because we have a belt on one side of the engine and they're going to be having a jack shaft and a chain running on the other side for the front 4-wheel drive, it's going to be pretty tight and pretty strange. I think there's going to be some serious mods to the frame, but we're butchering the hell out of this thing anyways. It shouldn't really be that big of a thing. It doesn't look like put a simple engine plate in there and you're off and running. It looks like it's going to be really tight. To give a brief description of the Pinzgauer, it was manufactured starting in the late 60s. They made a 4-wheel drive version, a 6-wheel drive version. We're going to be kind of replicating the 712M, that's a 6-wheel drive version, the first gen. And they were built in Austria originally. They switched hands over the years, but they're made for the military. And they had a pretty elaborate drivetrain. They were actually pretty quick traveling off-road and got amazing traction. A few interesting things about them. They actually had a 2.5 liter petrol engine, and it was air-cooled. Seems kind of interesting. We're going to stick with the air-cooled dynamics on here, running that 420 engine. They did really well off-road. We're not going to replicate down the whole drivetrain. We're just going to keep what we have here. It's going to be kind of a basic replica on the outside body. We're going to try to keep some of the similar lines and similar styling. I'm not going to dork out and get too intense with it because I want to get it finished in the next, 3-4 months hopefully. But it's going to be a lot of fun. And this thing actually did really well off-road. Always when you're cruising around with it, it's always engaged 4-wheel drive because it's got 2 solid axles in the rear. But when you hit electronic locking hubs on the front, you would lock everything up. So you had a true 6-wheel drive, and it was a beast off-road. So it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, you guys, I'm pretty excited about this. This about wraps up part number 1. Don't click off just yet because I got 2 YouTube channels I want to recommend in a moment. Back to the little mini Pinzgauer first. This is going to be a pretty fun little mini side-by-side project. The next part, we're actually going to be cutting the frame up and starting on a mini flatbed for it, and actually be installing an engine hopefully. For sure a rack and pinion for the steering to modify that, and rebuilding the front end and doing chain and sprockets. So it's going to actually start really evolving by this next video here. Now back to those 2 YouTube channels. There's 2 I want to recommend. The first one is Vasily Builds. He's a younger fabricator, probably early 20s, but he's a remarkable fabricator building go-karts and mini bikes and just very skilled. So if you want to check out his channel, I'll put a link below to that. And the secondary channel is actually a subscriber. He got a hold of me and told me he built a Mini Predator mini bike, and he did his own cool swing on it. He made a little snow bike. He was tired about how expensive snow bikes are, so he cut up a snowmobile and used it as a track and put a 212cc engine in an old frame, put a ski up front, and it turned out really well. So I think his channel is called Jake It's the Cop, something like that. And I checked out his channel originally, and he had 0 subscribers. Just had 1 or 2 videos up. And I was actually the first #1 subscriber. So if you guys check out those videos, consider maybe subscribing to those channels and at least throw them down a comment. Comments really help in bringing more views in. So think about that, guys. All right, and give me a thumbs up and leave a comment if you can. I'd appreciate it. Till next time, guys, take care. Bye.